I called him, begged him to be there. He said he was sick. But on Instagram, I saw their photo in wedding clothes. He was standing where my best man should have been. The morning of my wedding, I woke up with this knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with nerves. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with messages from family, friends, vendors, everyone except the one person I needed to hear from most. My brother. We'd always been tight, you know? Growing up in a small town outside Cleveland, we shared everything. Same room until we were teenagers, same friends, same dreams of getting out and making something of ourselves. When I moved to Chicago for work 3 years ago, he followed 6 months later. We lived in apartments 2 blocks apart, grabbed beers every Thursday, watched games together every Sunday. He was supposed to be my best man. But things got weird when I started dating my now wife. From day one, he had this look whenever she was around, like he was watching a movie he'd already seen and knew the ending sucked. He'd make these little comments, nothing you could really call him out on, but they stung. Stuff like asking if I was sure about moving in together so fast, or wondering out loud if she really got my sense of humor. The worst part was he wasn't wrong to be cautious. I had this pattern of falling hard and fast, then getting blindsided when things fell apart. My ex before my wife, we'll call her Sarah, had done a number on me. 2 years together, talked about marriage, the whole 9 yards. Then one day she just vanished. Left a note saying she needed space, blocked me on everything, moved out while I was at work. I found out later she'd been seeing someone else for months. My brother was the one who picked up the pieces after Sarah. He let me crash on his couch for 2 weeks when I couldn't stand being in my empty apartment. He listened to me ramble about what went wrong, brought me food when I forgot to eat, even helped me pack up her stuff when she finally came to get it. So when I met my wife 8 months later, I understood why he was protective. But this felt different. My wife was steady, honest, made me laugh in ways I'd forgotten I could. She had this way of calling me out on my crap without making me feel like garbage about it. When I told her about Sarah, she didn't try to fix me or compete with a ghost. She just listened and then made me the best grilled cheese sandwich I'd ever had. That's when I knew. My brother didn't see it that way. The comments got sharper. He started declining invitations to hang out when she'd be there. When I told him I was proposing, he went quiet for a long time, then just said he hoped I knew what I was doing. When I asked him to be my best man, he said yes, but it felt like he was agreeing to attend his own funeral. Then, a month before the wedding, he started pulling away. Missed our Thursday beers twice in a row. Didn't show up to my bachelor party. Said he had food poisoning. When I called to check on him, his voice sounded strange, distant, like he was talking to a stranger instead of his brother. The final straw came a week before the wedding. I was at his place, going over the ceremony details, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his whole face changed. Went pale, then red, then something I couldn't read. He shoved the phone in his pocket and mumbled something about work, but I saw enough of the screen to know it wasn't his boss texting him. It was a woman's name I didn't recognize. I didn't think much of it then. My brother dated, though he never brought anyone around. I figured he was just being private about whoever he was seeing. But looking back, that's when everything shifted. He became even more distant, started giving me one-word answers when I'd text him. When I asked if he needed help with his best man speech, he said he was still working on it. 3 days before the wedding, he called me. His voice sounded rough, like he'd been drinking or hadn't slept. He said he wasn't feeling well, might be coming down with something. I told him to rest up, that I needed him there. He made this sound, half laugh, half something else, and said he'd do his best. The morning of the wedding, that text came in at 6:47 a.m. I'm really sick. Can't make it. Sorry. I stared at my phone for 10 minutes, reading those 8 words over and over. My best man, my brother, the person who knew me better than anyone in the world, wasn't going to be at my wedding. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Same thing. My wife found me sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, still in my boxers, looking at my phone like it might suddenly change its mind and show me a different message. She didn't say anything, just sat next to me and put her hand on my back. That's when I lost it. Not just crying, full-on ugly sobbing. All the stress of the wedding, the months of tension with my brother, the fear that maybe he was right about everything. It all came crashing down. But you know what? The wedding was beautiful. My wife's brother stepped in as best man at the last minute. My college roommate gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry. My parents danced together for the first time since their divorce 10 years ago. By the end of the night, I'd almost forgotten about the empty space where my brother should have been. Almost. Update 1. I wasn't going to post an update, but some of you asked what happened next, and honestly, I need to get this out somewhere. The story gets worse before it gets better. The day after our wedding, my wife and I were supposed to fly out for our honeymoon in Costa Rica. We were at the airport, grabbing coffee before our flight, when my phone started blowing up. Not calls, Instagram notifications. Dozens of them. My wife was in the bathroom when I opened the app. The first thing I saw was a photo that made my brain short-circuit. It was my brother, in a black tuxedo, standing next to a woman in a white dress. They were holding hands, both of them grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Finally married my best friend." The woman was Sarah, my ex-girlfriend Sarah. I dropped my phone. Actually dropped it, right there in the middle of the airport Starbucks. My wife came back to find me on my hands and knees, picking up the pieces of my shattered screen, and she knew immediately something was wrong. When I showed her the photo on her phone, she went completely still. Then she sat down hard in the plastic chair and said something I'd never heard her say before. The flight to Costa Rica was the longest 6 hours of my life. My wife held my hand the whole time while I stared out the window, trying to process what I'd seen. My brother, had married my ex-girlfriend on the same day as my wedding. While I was wondering where he was, worried he might be really sick, he was saying vows to the woman who'd ripped my heart out 2 years earlier. But here's the thing that really messed me up. The math didn't add up. Sarah had left me 20 months ago. My brother had been acting weird for maybe 6 weeks. So either this was the world's fastest courtship, or... I called my cousin as soon as we landed. She's always been the family gossip, knows everything about everyone. When I told her what I'd seen, she went quiet for a long time. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Oh, honey, I thought you knew." Turns out, my brother and Sarah had been seeing each other for over a year. Maybe longer. My cousin had spotted them together at a restaurant across town about 6 months after Sarah and I broke up, but she'd assumed I was okay with it since I'd started dating my wife. She said they'd been pretty secretive about it, but word had gotten around the family. Everyone knew except me. My own brother had been dating my ex-girlfriend for over a year, and I'd been completely clueless. All those times he'd declined to hang out when my wife was around, all those weird comments about my relationship, the way he'd acted when I told him I was proposing. He wasn't being protective of me. He was protecting himself. The betrayal hit me in waves. First, the obvious stuff. He'd lied to me, hidden a relationship that he knew would hurt me, chosen her over me on what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. But then came the deeper cuts. How long had they been laughing about me behind my back? Had he been the someone else Sarah was seeing when she left me? Had he been planning this for months, maybe years? I spent the first 2 days of my honeymoon in a rage spiral. My poor wife tried everything, suggested we go zip-lining, took me to this beautiful beach, even offered to cut the trip short and go home. But I was stuck in this loop of hurt and anger that I couldn't break out of. On the 3rd day, something shifted. We were sitting at this little cafe overlooking the ocean, and my wife was telling me about her sister's wedding drama from last year. Nothing major, just typical family stuff. But as she was talking, I realized something. She was here. She'd married me, chosen me, stood by me while I fell apart over someone else's betrayal. My brother had made his choice, but so had she. That night, I finally called him. It rang twice before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I blocked his number, unfollowed him on social media, and decided I was done. If he wanted to be with Sarah, fine. But he didn't get to have me too. The rest of the honeymoon was actually amazing. Once I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes, once I stopped imagining confrontations that were never going to happen, I remembered why I'd married this incredible woman. We hiked through cloud forests, learned to surf, ate our weight in fresh fruit. By the time we flew home, I felt like myself again. But the real test was coming back to Chicago, back to the life where my brother had been such a big part of everything. Update 2. It's been 3 months since the wedding, and I'm finally ready to share what happened next. Some of you have been messaging me, asking if I ever talked to my brother, if I got closure, all that stuff. The answer is complicated. About 6 weeks after we got back from Costa Rica, my brother started trying to reach out. First through mutual friends, then through our parents, then directly. He'd call from different numbers when I blocked him, send emails to my work address, even showed up at my apartment building one evening. I watched him from my window, standing on the sidewalk, looking up at my unit for almost an hour before finally leaving. The worst part was how it affected my wife. She'd been incredible through everything, but I could see the strain. She'd tense up every time my phone rang, worry when I got quiet and distant. One night, about 2 months after the wedding, she found me sitting in our kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at my laptop screen. I'd been going through old photos of my brother and me, trying to figure out when everything had started falling apart. She sat down across from me and said something that hit me like a truck. "You're grieving him like he died." She was right. That's exactly what it felt like. The brother I'd grown up with, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike and covered for me when I broke Mom's lamp, the one who'd held me while I cried over Sarah, that person was gone. In his place was this stranger who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. But here's where the story takes a turn I didn't see coming. About a week after that conversation with my wife, I got a call from my dad. He sounded tired, older than his 62 years. He told me my brother had been trying to reach me through the family, and Dad was sick of being in the middle of it. He said I needed to either talk to my brother or tell him to stop, but this limbo was killing everyone. I was about to hang up when Dad said something that stopped me cold. "Your brother told me what really happened with Sarah. The whole story. And son, I think you need to hear it." Turns out, my brother hadn't been lying about everything. The timeline I'd constructed in my head was wrong. Sarah had reached out to him about a month after she left me. Not romantically. She was struggling with depression, had been for months, and needed someone to talk to who understood what she was going through. My brother had been dealing with his own mental health issues after a bad breakup of his own. They'd started as friends. Just two broken people trying to figure out how to be okay again. My brother had even encouraged her to reach out to me, to explain why she'd left the way she did. But Sarah was ashamed, convinced I'd never forgive her for how she'd handled things. She was probably right. Their relationship didn't turn romantic until almost a year later. By then, I was with my wife, seemed happy, had moved on. My brother thought he was in the clear. But as things got more serious with Sarah, he realized he'd backed himself into an impossible corner. How do you tell your brother you're in love with his ex-girlfriend? Especially when that ex had hurt him so badly. So he did what a lot of people do when they're scared and confused. He made a series of increasingly bad decisions. He hid the relationship, hoping it would either fizzle out or I'd somehow be okay with it. When I got engaged, he panicked. When I asked him to be my best man, he said yes because he couldn't figure out how to say no without explaining why. The morning of my wedding, Sarah had a complete breakdown. She'd been planning to tell me about their relationship after I got back from my honeymoon, but the guilt and stress of the secret had been eating at her for months. She'd been having panic attacks, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My brother found her that morning in their hotel room, hyperventilating and convinced she'd ruined both our lives. That's when he made the decision to elope. Not because he wanted to hurt me, but because he thought it would be easier for everyone if they just got married quietly and disappeared. He'd planned to tell me everything after the fact, when the dust had settled. But someone posted that photo before he could reach out. Dad finished the story and waited for me to respond. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved. My brother hadn't been plotting against me for years. But another part of me was even angrier. All this pain, all this family drama, could have been avoided if he'd just been honest from the beginning. That night, I told my wife everything Dad had shared. She listened without interrupting, then asked me one question. "What do you want to do?" I thought about it for a long time. What did I want? I wanted my brother back. I wanted to not feel this knot in my stomach every time someone mentioned his name. I wanted to stop checking his social media to see if he looked happy. I wanted to stop wondering if Sarah was making him grilled cheese sandwiches when he was sad. But I also wanted him to understand what he'd done to me. I wanted him to know that good intentions don't erase the impact of your actions. I wanted him to earn his way back into my life, not just expect forgiveness because we shared DNA. So I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I wrote him a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter, on paper, with a pen. I told him everything I'd been feeling for the past 3 months. The betrayal, the confusion, the grief. But I also told him what Dad had shared, and that I understood why he'd made the choices he did. I ended the letter with an ultimatum. If he wanted any chance of having a relationship with me again, he needed to come clean about everything. Not just to me, but to our parents, to the family members who'd been taking sides. He needed to own his mistakes, apologize for the hurt he'd caused, and proved that he was willing to do the work to rebuild trust. I mailed the letter on a Tuesday. He called me the following Sunday. Final update. It's been almost a year since my wedding, and I'm writing this final update because some of you have been asking how things turned out. The truth is, it's complicated, but maybe that's how real life is supposed to be. My brother did what I asked. He called our parents, our extended family, even some of our mutual friends. He told them the whole story, not just his version, but acknowledged the ways he'd screwed up. He apologized to my wife, which meant more to me than I can explain. He even offered to pay for the wedding photographer to reshoot some of the family photos he'd missed, though we declined. But here's what I didn't expect. Hearing the full story didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse, in some ways. Because now I understood that my brother had been in pain too, had been struggling with an impossible situation, and I'd been so wrapped up in my own hurt that I couldn't see his. The first time we met in person was at a coffee shop downtown, 3 months after the letter. It was awkward as hell. We sat across from each other like strangers, both of us trying to figure out how to talk to someone we'd known our entire lives. He looked different, older, maybe, or just tired. He told me about his job, his new apartment, safe topics that didn't venture into dangerous territory. But then he said something that broke through all the careful politeness. I miss you. Just 3 words, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. Because I missed him too. I missed having someone who got my terrible jokes, who remembered embarrassing stories from our childhood, who could make me laugh when I was taking myself too seriously. I missed my brother. That's when I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a choice you make every day, sometimes every hour. Some days I felt like we were building something new together. Other days, the hurt would catch me off guard, and I'd remember why I'd been so angry. We started slow. Coffee once a month, then twice a month. We'd text occasionally, usually about sports or some stupid meme one of us found. It felt like learning to be brothers all over again, except this time with the knowledge that we could hurt each other in ways we'd never imagined. The turning point came about 6 months ago. I was having a really bad day at work, the kind where everything goes wrong and you start questioning every decision you've ever made. My wife was out of town visiting her parents, and I was sitting in my apartment, feeling sorry for myself, when my phone rang. It was my brother. He'd been offered a promotion that would require him to move to Denver, and he wanted to know what I thought. Not asking for permission, just wanting my opinion. Like brothers do. We talked for 2 hours. About the job, about Denver, about whether Sarah would be okay leaving her family behind. It was the first time he'd really talked about her with me, and I was surprised to find that it didn't hurt the way I'd expected it to. She was just a person he cared about, not this symbol of everything that had gone wrong between us. At the end of the call, I told him I thought he should take the job, that it sounded like a great opportunity, and that I'd miss him, but I wanted him to be happy. After I hung up, I realized something had shifted. The anger I'd been carrying around for months had somehow transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something like acceptance. They moved to Denver in March. My brother and I text more now than we did when he lived 2 blocks away. He sends me photos of mountains and complains about the altitude. I send him pictures of Chicago pizza and complain about the weather. It's not the same relationship we had before, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we needed to burn down the old version to build something stronger. Here's what I've learned. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up for you when it matters. My wife showed up. My friends showed up. Some of my family showed up, and some didn't. My brother didn't show up when I needed him most, but he's showing up now, and that has to count for something. Last month, my wife and I found out we're expecting our first child. When I called to tell my brother, he cried. Actually cried, right there on the phone. He said he was sorry he'd missed so much, that he wanted to be better, to be the uncle this kid deserved. I told him he would be. Because here's the thing about family. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to keep trying, even when you mess up, even when you hurt each other, even when you're scared and make terrible decisions because you don't know what else to do. My brother didn't come to my wedding. He married my ex-girlfriend on the same day, and for months I thought that was the end of our story. But it wasn't the end. It was just the middle. The messy, complicated, painful middle that most people's stories have, even if they don't talk about it. I'm not saying you should forgive everyone who hurts you. Some betrayals are unforgivable. Some relationships aren't worth saving. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you get the chance to choose your family all over again. To decide that love is stronger than hurt, that connection is more important than being right. My brother is flying in next week to help me paint the nursery. Sarah's coming too, and I'm genuinely looking forward to meeting her again. Not as my ex-girlfriend, not as the woman who broke my heart, but as my brother's wife. As family. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones worth fighting for. Sometimes family is the people who stay, and sometimes it's the people who find their way back. I chose to let my brother find his way back. And you know what? I'm glad I did.